Hundreds of Palestinian prisoners are freed as an Israeli delegation travels to Cairo to continue ceasefire talks. Hello, I'm Arnold Naidu. This is The Heat. Hamas says it's ready to negotiate the next phase of negotiations in hopes of reaching a permanent end to the conflict. It comes after the latest exchange of hostages and prisoners. Late on Wednesday, Hamas returned the bodies of 4 Israelis who died in captivity, and Israel released more than 600 Palestinian prisoners and detainees. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu approved sending the Israeli delegation to Cairo for talks. The delegation is expected to seek an extension of the first phase of the ceasefire, which ends on Saturday.
Our delegation will go to Cairo and see whether we have a common ground to negotiate. We said we are ready to make the framework longer in a return to release of more hostages. If it is possible, we'll do that.
Okay, for more on the negotiations, let's bring in our panel. Joining us from Cairo is Mohamed Higazy. He's a former ambassador and former Egyptian assistant foreign minister. Also with us from North Carolina, Burhan Ghanayem is the board chair of the human rights organization Voices for Justice in Palestine. Khodr Zaarour is a professor of political science and international relations at North Carolina State University. And Daniel Seidemann is a lawyer and expert on Jerusalem and the founder of the Israeli NGO Terrestrial Jerusalem. He joins us from Jerusalem. Thanks, everyone, for being with us. Daniel, let me start with you. Let's look at the current status of the ceasefire negotiations. Hamas returned the remains of 4 additional hostages on Wednesday night that took place, and Israel has released more than 600 Palestinian prisoners. Most of them were held without charge. But now Israel has sent a delegation to Cairo to negotiate an extension to phase 1. That was not part of the original plan. The original plan was that this would be the end of phase 1, then they would start negotiations on phase 2, part of which actually calls for a permanent ceasefire. So what is your sense of what Israel is doing right now? Why the extension?
Netanyahu does not want an end of hostilities. He has a vested interest in the continuation of hostilities. Israel has not fulfilled all of its obligations under the first stage. The reports are that we will not withdraw as promised from the Philadelphia corridor bordering between Gaza and Egypt, and Netanyahu wants an extension of the first stage because the second stage ends in an end of a cessation of hostilities. Netanyahu does not want a cessation of hostilities because it will mean his government will fall, and if his government would fall, he falls from power, and if he falls from power, he goes to jail.
Right. Daniel, the U.S. envoy, Steve Witkoff, he is set to travel to the Middle East this weekend. What role is he expected to play in these negotiations? Would he be supportive of the Israeli plan to get an extension?
There are 2 ways of looking at this. Witkoff does not exist in a vacuum. And there's Trump, for whom he works. And there are 2 Trumps. The first Trump is the one who tells Israel, do whatever the hell you want, and I'll back you. Under those circumstances, Witkoff will weigh in order to extend the first phase and defer the second phase. On the other hand, there's a second Trump who says, get the hostages home. And if that is the message, we will see Netanyahu capitulating and moving even reluctantly to the second stage. My impression is, and this is no more than an impression, that Witkoff would like to see the latter. He wants the hostages home. It's not entirely up to him. But at the current moment, what is going to happen, what Trump wants to happen.
Burhan Ghanayem, What is your view on what is taking place right now with this Israeli call for an extension? At the same time, Hamas is saying, look, they want to get on with negotiations to reach some kind of a permanent ceasefire. I mean, this is a fundamental difference. Could it risk the collapse of these talks?
I wanted to say this. Historically, Israel really never honored an agreement they signed. I mean, you take it from Oslo on, all the time they break the agreements. They will never honor the agreement. I think they are playing the game now because the end of the first phase and start of the second phase means ending the hostilities, period. And they do not want to do that. Israel have intentions. Israel is empowered by the Trump administration and his positions. And at the end of the day, it's not what really Trump wants. I think at the end, it is what Netanyahu wants. And they will continue to do that. And Netanyahu, as was said by my colleague in there, is that they really do not care about the hostages and the whole thing. Netanyahu is worried about what if he accepts an end to hostilities. So I am not optimistic, and I do believe Israel will continue with the support of the Trump administration to heckle and play games and break the rules and break the agreements. The only factor that may change this whole picture is pressure from within Israel for the release of the hostages.
Right, Burhan, what can you tell us about conditions in Gaza right now? There are hundreds of Palestinians trying to survive in very icy temperatures. They're trying to survive in tents, and they're trying to get back into their homes, which have been demolished. And the Israelis are blocking the transfer of critical humanitarian as well as medical supplies into the territory, as well as temporary mobile homes. So what do you know about conditions there?
And that's really exactly, you described some of the positions that Israel is taking, which is breaking the rules. They committed to bring all of these trailers and tents and food, and they are not delivering on their promise and their part of the agreement. Israel actually, if we wanted to follow this, I am from the West Bank. My family lives in the Tulkarm area, and they have been ethnic cleansing of the West Bank as well since the ceasefire. In the last 4 or 5 weeks, over 40,000 people in Tulkarm and Jenin, where my family lives, were ethnically cleansed and completely occupied the Jenin refugee camp, the Tulkarm refugee camp, the Nur Shams refugee camps. So Israel really is not interested. As long as they are empowered by the United States, Israel will continue to violate the agreements, and Israel will continue to do what they want, because also there is another factor, which is Netanyahu is fearful on his future, because if he ends the conflict, he may be replaced and jailed.
Right. Khodr, Burhan was telling us there about the Israeli military operations in the West Bank. What do you believe is behind these Israeli operations on the West Bank? I mean, is this a land grab?
Oh, thanks for having me. There are a lot of inconsistencies within the Netanyahu government, and those inconsistencies due to the fragmentation of the political alliances he put himself in several years ago. Some of the people on the extreme right want to see more expansion into Syria, into Lebanon, pushing Palestinians out of Gaza into Egypt and possibly Jordan. So those inconsistencies, we have seen them at play. The statements that are coming out of the Netanyahu office last several months has been inconsistencies. Again, he wants to maintain his alliances. He wants to maintain himself at the helm of power in Israel. And that's only one issue that he has to deal with. International pressure is another issue. U.S. push and pull in different directions, also another factor thrown into the mix here. And not to forget, we have an Arab summit that's really critical to be held on 4th. That's another factor that will push this issue either way. But I think that we're going to wait until the March 4th before we see any changes on the ground.
Right. Ambassador Higazy, that summit, Egypt will be the host of that summit. It's an emergency meeting of the Arab League, takes place next week. Egypt and Jordan, along with other Arab states, have rejected that proposal by President Trump that Palestinians be expelled from Gaza and then be forced into neighboring countries, those neighboring countries being Jordan and Egypt. This is what the Egyptian President, Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, said at a press conference. He was there with the Spanish Prime Minister, Pedro Sanchez, in Madrid. Let's listen to him.
We confirmed the importance of the international community's support and their adoption of the plan for the reconstruction of Gaza without the displacement of the Palestinian people. I repeat, without the displacement of the Palestinian people from their land and their homeland, which they do not accept to be given up, and which guarantees the immediate start of relief and recovery operations.
So, Ambassador Higazy, this is a key meeting of Arab states that will take place. What options do the Arab states have in response to this crisis?
We have a workable plan. It has been discussed with the limited Arab summit in Riyadh, and we are taking it further to the Arab summit. And I think all the parties by now knows more or less that it is realistic and it do justice to all. And I guess that it has three components. One is the immediate relief, which is leading to a reconstruction, world reconstruction led by Egypt and the UN campaign. And this reconstruction era might take like 3 to 5 years. And we would suggest that a light at the end of the tunnel should appear, like the two-state solution. Should be gathered in the third phase so that we can address the Gaza after, who will be ruling Gaza, and what else can we do to safeguard the people who are on the ground. At the same time, we should pay attention to what is happening in the West Bank with the Israeli intention and the right-wing intention to either annex the Zone C or to maybe even go further to annex the whole. But I don't think the world community is ready for that. And again, there is an Israeli delegation now in Cairo. And if the proposition of extending the first phase is on discussion, the reconstruction should start. The immediate relief service should enter. The temporary housing and heavy material for reconstruction should enter as well. And the thing is not only about prisoners, it's about the livelihood of 2.5 million people.
Yeah, Ambassador, briefly, you talk about reconstruction there, and that meeting that you referred to in Riyadh, Arab states pledged $20 billion for the reconstruction effort, but when does that start, and who would take the lead in the reconstruction effort in Gaza?
Egypt will propose with the UN, along with the Arab states, this first package of 20 billion, and for the rest of partners from the world communities to adhere to the same plan. And I think everybody is ready. The International Conference for Reconstruction will come immediately after we start the relief period. The relief period will lead us to maintain the livelihood of the people on the ground in 3 safe areas. And after that, we will go into the reconstruction, a consortium from the Arab countries, a consortium from Europe and the United States will be all participating. And I think the world community are ready to support the moment that there is a light at the end of the tunnel. Without the two-state solution, reconstruction is meaningless. They have destroyed before Port of Gaza, airport of Gaza, things that has been even financed by the European Union. So, as I said, we need an agreement that has to be adhered to, as you've
guest speaker was saying that the Israeli did not honor any of their agreements.
Okay.
I remember I met the clerk in Jordan, and he said that I eradicated apartheid because I respected all my agreements. Netanyahu didn't.
Okay. Daniel, United States President Trump, he came up with this idea a couple of weeks ago in which he wants the United States to take over Gaza, and he wants to develop it into some kind of international beach resort. Now that took a little bit of an unusual turn over the past few days, unusual to put it mildly, when Trump released a video on his social media platform, Truth Social. This was a video produced by artificial intelligence, I should say. And this is his vision for this Middle East Riviera, as he calls it. Let's look at a little bit of it.
Tunnels coming to set you free, bringing the light for all to see. No more tunnels, no more fear. Top Gaza is finally here.
So, Daniel, is there any support for this U.S. idea to expel Palestinians and redevelop Gaza as some kind of international resort?
Regrettably, yes, there is support. The idea is total fantasy. The Palestinians will not leave Gaza, certainly not voluntarily. It is entirely fantasy. But even if it's ridiculous, it's dangerous because it moves the needle and it makes the expulsion a second Nakba of the Palestinians, a socially acceptable topic of conversation. 5 years ago, one could not say we want another Nakba in normal society in Israel, and Trump has moved the needle. Now, this clip that you showed is probably one of the scariest things I've seen. Gaza is a serious issue. There are people, hundreds of thousands, millions, who are suffering, whose needs need to be addressed. And you come up with an artificial clip that is completely, it is a product of the wild imaginations, and regrettably, one of those imaginations is Trump's. It's the fact that this individual will be making life and death decisions, not only on Israel-Palestine, and producing something like this is deeply disturbing. I'm an Israeli, and I look at Gaza and I see the devastation. I am completely appalled by it. I take offense at what this clip does to the Palestinian residents of Gaza, who are my neighbors. I'm not ignoring October 7th. It was horrible, unspeakable. It will take time for us to recover. And the carnage and slaughter in Gaza also was unspeakable. But none of this is served by, this fake reality that humiliates and denigrates Palestinian dignity. I, as an Israeli, take offense to that.
Burhan Ghanayem, there are all kinds of options being looked at now on the future of Gaza. I mean, one of the proposals is that the Palestinian Authority take over administration of Gaza, that Hamas would step aside and allow the PA to govern Gaza. Hamas has reportedly said that it's prepared to relinquish any desire to control Gaza, but it is not prepared to give up its weapons. Do you think that proposal will go anywhere?
Let me just say something related to your previous question.
Yeah.
What is happening in the last year or two, that talk about genocide and ethnic cleansing is normalized in the international community. Israel talks about it, the United States talks about it, they are doing it, and that is really the dangerous thing in this situation. I support any proposal that will end the occupation the settler occupation of Israel of Palestinian territories, Gaza and the West Bank. I think if Israel accepts this and the United States supports such an action, the rest will be minor PA or Palestinian reconciliation between Hamas and the Palestinian Authority is minor. But keep in mind, all of this is theoretical as long as Israel continues its settler colonialism. I mean, keep in mind the last 3-4 months, Israel occupied additional territories in Syria. Israel did not withdraw from southern Lebanon.
Yeah.
They are still there. So Israel really never talks about withdrawing. Israel reoccupied parts of the West Bank just last week. My hometown, Tulkarem, was occupied. So we need to get Israel to start accepting the Palestinians as people who are entitled to freedom and liberty, and then the rest will become minor. The bigger issue is how to get rid of this colonial occupation and allow the Palestinian to determine their future.
Okay, Khodr Zaarour, what are your thoughts on this proposal? I mean, what kind of legitimacy does the Palestinian Authority have among Palestinians in the West Bank, in Jerusalem, as well as in Gaza?
Well, over the years, we have seen, due to Israeli policies, the PA has been marginalized within, of course, the political process. Certainly, they have been marginalized within Palestinian communities. And of course, this is designed by the right-wing Israeli governments over the last 20-some years. I think the proposal, Hamas in the last 20-some years has extended kind of an offer to Israeli policymakers for secession for 10 years, 3 different times, and Israeli governments has ignored them. I think that it could possibly work. The weapons that Hamas has are not really a threat, major threat to Israeli security, as Israel has overwhelming, firepower. Of course, much more impressive than the Hamas. Certainly, with time, Hamas said from day one, we don't need these weapons. What we need is a homeland. We need a state, of Palestine to be created, with East Jerusalem being its capital. This is not going outside the norm, outside of international law, outside of the expectations that we have set since 1948. We keep talking about the Nakba. Well, the first Nakba never ended. So this is not the second Nakba. The first Nakba has never ended.
Right.
We keep seeing Israeli policies pushing Palestinians out of their homeland with the support of Israeli military. Settlers go into their homes. They burn farms. They burn olive trees. So this is a continuation of the first Nakba. Well, we keep also hearing that what happens the next day after the war? Well, what happens, one of the questions that has been ignored over the years, what can we do to create a Palestinian state? That was the mood in 1990s, and that should be created again. Normally, when we see two heads of state meeting to discuss diplomacy, we expect them to come up with a creative policy change. When we saw Netanyahu in the White House with Mr. Trump, we have seen their discussions, heard their discussions, talking about how to ethnically cleanse entire population. So diplomatically, both leaders have failed to produce an agreement, and this doesn't sit in not only with the Palestinian communities, it doesn't sit well with the Arab community or the international community, even within the United States, that created divisions between the parties and within.
Okay. Ambassador Higazy, there's yet another proposal on the table, and this one came from the Israeli opposition leader, Yair Lapid. He was speaking in Washington at the Foundation for the Defense of Democracies. That's a very staunchly pro-Israel think tank here in Washington. And this is what his proposal is, that Hamas be removed from power and that Egypt assume temporary control of Gaza once all the hostages are released. Let's listen to part of what Lapid had to say.
Egypt will take control of the Gaza Strip through a UN Security Council resolution, including internal security and civilian affairs. The control will be framed as guardianship, with the objective being to hand Gaza to the Palestinian Authority during the 8 or 15 years following a process of reform and de-radicalization with measurable benchmarks.
So Ambassador Lapid also said that as an incentive for Egypt, the international community would pay off Cairo's $155 billion worth of foreign external debt. Do you see any scenario where this could happen in the way that he's describing?
No, I don't see any possibility that Egypt accepts to demolish the right of the Palestinian to rule their land. Injustice has been occurred for 70 years, and further injustice by ignoring the Palestinian Authority, the Palestinian people right to self-govern their independent sovereign state. The International Court of Justice, in their ruling in July, which has been adopted by the UN General Assembly in September, said clearly that the unity between Gaza Strip and the West Bank, with East Jerusalem as its capital, is the geographical limitation of the Palestinian state. Let me just take you, and first of all, with due respect to this proposals or other proposals, is utterly unusual, and Palestinians should rule their land. This is the fact that might lead us to a solution. End of the occupation. Put the Palestinian has shown that they are people who deserve to govern their country. And if I may just draw an analogy between the IRA and Hamas, IRA has given its arms when the Good Friday Agreement was signed in Britain and the Irish authorities. So you cannot really talk about dismantling arms of any resistant movement without giving a light at the end of the tunnel, without the promise of the two-state solution. My last point here is that we need to pull forces to bring a new geography, a new ruling of the Palestinian. We negotiated Hamas and Fatah in Cairo, the establishment of a social supporting unit which will govern under the auspices legally and politically of the Palestinian authorities in Ramallah, and it will continue observing the reconstruction. And I hope that in the second phase we will have a political horizon where we all support, which is the two-state solution, and we have to adhere to international law, not to allow the occupier to dictate the future of the occupied land.
Daniel, I've just got a little bit of time left, less than a minute, but I want to get your views on one other development, and that is the Chancellor-elect of Germany. They've just had an election there, and there'll be a new Chancellor. Friedrich Merz, he is extending an invitation to Prime Minister Netanyahu to visit Germany, and as we are all aware, there's a warrant out for the arrest of Mr. Netanyahu. Germany is a signatory to the Rome Statute that created the ICC. I mean, wouldn't it be legally obliged to arrest Prime Minister Netanyahu if he enters Germany?
I'm an attorney, but I'm not an expert in international law. My understanding is that signatories to the Rome Statute are obligated to do so. Now, I am of Jewish German extraction, and I understand the complexities and the delicacies of the relationship between Germany and Israel's prime minister. However, I don't think that that should be allowed to cloud judgment. And international law is one of the most important tools in the toolbox of proceeding to end this conflict. And I hope that Germany will find the correct balance in order to fulfill the positive role that they can.
Okay, and that is where we have to leave it. Thanks to all of you for being with us on the show. That's it for this edition of The Heat. I'm Anand Naidu in Washington.